Gandalf wasn't always Gandalf. Before he came to Middle-earth, before he was a wizard, before he even had that name, he was Olorin, a spirit serving under the greatest powers in creation, and his teacher, a goddess so powerful that Morgoth himself feared her. She taught him everything, his wisdom, his compassion, even his love of fireworks. But here's what most people don't know. Without her guidance, Gandalf would never have become the hero who saved Middle-earth. Stay with me, because the story of who trained Gandalf gets stranger the deeper we go, and it involves beings that make Sauron look like an insect. Let's start with who Gandalf really was. In Middle-earth, people knew him as a wizard, a mysterious old man with a staff and grey robes. But that was just a disguise, a physical form he wore. His true nature was something far older and more powerful. Gandalf was a Maya, one of the Ainur, the divine spirits created by Eru Ilúvatar before the world existed. The Ainur sang the world into creation through the music of the Ainur, and when the world became real, many of them entered it to shape and guide it. The most powerful became the Valar, essentially the gods of Middle-earth. The lesser Ainur became the Maiar, still immensely powerful, but servants to the Valar. And Gandalf's original name, Olorin. Tolkien writes in the Silmarillion, "Wisest of the Maiar was Olorin. He too dwelt in Lorien, but his ways took him often to the house of Nienna, and of her he learned pity and patience." This is crucial. Olorin, who would become Gandalf, was considered the wisest of all the Maiar, not the strongest, not the most powerful, the wisest, and that wisdom came from his teachers, the Valar who shaped him. But before we talk about his main mentor, we need to understand something. Olorin was afraid. When the Valar decided to send wizards to Middle-earth to help fight Sauron, Olorin didn't want to go. He feared Sauron's power. He felt inadequate for the task. And that's when his teacher intervened. Her name was Varda, but the elves called her Elbereth Gilthoniel, the Star Kindler. She was the queen of the Valar, the spouse of Manwë, the king. And she was the being who Morgoth, the first and greatest Dark Lord, Sauron's master, feared above all others. Think about that. Morgoth, who corrupted entire races, who broke mountains, who nearly destroyed all of Middle-earth, he was afraid of Varda. Tolkien writes, "But of all the great ones who dwell in this world, the elves hold Varda most in reverence and love. Elbereth they name her, and they call upon her name out of the shadows of Middle-earth, and uplift it in song at the rising of the stars. Morgoth feared her more than all the wrath of the other Valar." Why did Morgoth fear her? Because Varda created the stars. Before there was a sun or moon, before there was any light in the world except the 2 trees of Valinor, Varda set the stars in the heavens. And those stars became weapons against darkness. The light of the stars was holy, pure, uncorrupted. It was poison to evil things. This was Gandalf's primary teacher, a goddess of light and stars who Morgoth himself couldn't face. Varda dwelt with her husband Manwë on top of Tanikitil, the highest mountain in creation. From there, they could see everything that happened in the world. And Olorin, the future Gandalf, served them both. He learned from their wisdom, their perspective, their understanding of Eru's purposes. From Manwë, the king of the Valar, Olorin learned about leadership, about wind and air, about seeing patterns and possibilities. Manwë was the one most aligned with Eru's will, the one who understood the bigger picture. This is where Gandalf learned to see beyond immediate circumstances, to understand how small actions could change great events. But it was from Varda that Olorin learned something even more crucial: hope. The stars that Varda created weren't just beautiful, they were symbols of hope in darkness. When the elves first awoke in Middle-earth, the first thing they saw were Varda's stars. In their darkest moments, they would look up at the stars and remember that light existed, that darkness wasn't eternal. And Gandalf carried this teaching with him. Think about what he says in the films. Even the smallest person can change the course of the future. That's not just movie dialogue. That's pure Varda philosophy. The stars seem small and distant, but they pierce the darkness. A single point of light can guide travelers through the night. There's more. Tolkien tells us that Olorin also learned from Nienna, the Vala of mercy and mourning. From her, he learned pity and compassion. This is why Gandalf showed mercy to Gollum, why he believed in hobbits, why he didn't give up on people. But it was Varda who taught him that mercy must be coupled with strength, that compassion without wisdom is weakness. When the Valar decided to send the Astari, the wizards, to Middle-earth, there was a council about who should go. Saruman volunteered immediately. He craved the mission, the chance to exercise power. But Olorin? He was afraid. He didn't think he was strong enough to face Sauron. And this is where Varda did something remarkable. Tolkien hints that she was the one who encouraged Olorin to go. Not because he was powerful, but because he was wise. Not because he was fearless, but because he understood his limitations. This is a crucial detail. Gandalf was chosen precisely because he was reluctant. The Valar had learned from Morgoth's rebellion that those who sought power were the most dangerous. They needed someone who didn't want power, who would use it only when necessary, who would guide rather than dominate. Varda's teaching prepared Gandalf for exactly this role. She had taught him to be a light in darkness without trying to replace the sun. She had taught him that the greatest power is often the gentlest, that stars are more enduring than fire, that hope is stronger than force. When Gandalf arrived in Middle-earth, he came as an old man with a staff, not a warrior in shining armor, not a king demanding obedience, an old man who walked among people, who listened, who counseled, who inspired. That was Varda's influence showing through. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When Gandalf died fighting the Balrog, and was sent back as Gandalf the White, something changed. He was more powerful, yes. But more importantly, he was more aligned with his original purpose, with what Varda and Manwë had taught him. Gandalf the White had a different quality. His staff could break Saruman's staff. His presence could drive back the Nazgûl. When he stood before the Witch King at the gates of Minas Tirith, even that ancient evil hesitated. Why? Because Gandalf had been sent back by powers greater than Sauron, greater than Morgoth. He had been sent back by the Valar themselves, by Manwë and Varda. And think about his role in the story. Gandalf never defeated Sauron in direct combat. He never led armies to victory through his own strength. Instead, he inspired others. He found the one small being, a hobbit, who could carry the ring when mighty warriors would have failed. He believed in Frodo when no one else did. That's Varda's teaching in action, the small light that pierces darkness, the seemingly insignificant choice that changes everything, the star that guides travelers home. When the elves in Middle-earth cried out to Elbereth in their darkest moments, they were calling on Varda. And every time Gandalf brought hope to a hopeless situation, every time he found light in darkness, every time he believed in the small and overlooked, he was channeling his teacher's wisdom. The tragedy is that most people in Middle-earth never knew this. They saw an old wizard with tricks and riddles. They didn't understand that he had been trained by the Queen of the Stars herself, that every word of encouragement he spoke carried the weight of divine wisdom. that his kindness to hobbits reflected the compassion of beings who shaped the world. Varda taught Gandalf everything that made him who he was. His wisdom came from Manwë and her. His compassion came from Nienna, but was refined by Varda's understanding of light and darkness. His courage came from serving beings who had faced Morgoth himself, and his faith in the small and overlooked came from the goddess who proved that the smallest stars could pierce the deepest darkness. So when you see Gandalf in the story, remember, you're not just seeing a wizard, you're seeing the student of the Queen of the Stars, carrying her light into a world that desperately needs it. And every act of hope, every moment of wisdom, every time he refuses to give up, that's Varda's influence, still shining after thousands of years. That's the real story of Gandalf's teacher, not a forgotten mentor, but a goddess whose lessons saved Middle-earth through her student. If this changed how you see Gandalf, subscribe for more deep Tolkien lore. Drop a like if you never knew about Varda and Manwë's role in shaping Gandalf. And tell me, what other Vala would you want to learn about? Take care, and see you in the next one.